Buddhism. The Four Noble Truths. About 2.5 millennia ago, in 563 BC, Siddhartha Gautama was born to a noble family in Lumbini, which is situated in present-day Nepal. His father was the chief of the Shakya clan. Siddhartha enjoyed an affluent life until the time he chose mendicancy. It was the suffering that he observed in his surroundings which had his heart and view towards the world change. He wondered as to why there were sufferings. There is a story associated with his renunciation of living a luxurious and privileged life. He once saw a funeral going, and looking at people crying and sobbing got him to think about man's suffering. In addition to that, he thought that his physical body is subject to old age, disease, and eventually death, and there should be a remedy for liberation, and that went to become a doctrine of nirvana. Buddhism took up a form of religion after the demise of Siddhartha Gautama. He had started to be called as Buddha, the Enlightened One. The whole world knows Siddhartha as Buddha. There are some basic concepts of Buddhism. The adherents of Buddhism do not believe in God in essence. Their focus remains on inner peace and wisdom. Meditation remains the main tool for achieving inner peace. Morals are stressed upon in Buddhism. Adherents are encouraged to avoid self-indulgence. There is a concept of karma that suggests what goes around comes around. Reincarnation is also one of the most important concepts of Buddhism. However, on top of all the most important of Buddha's teaching are the Four Noble Truths. He meditated for a long time under the Bodhi tree and came to deduce the four principles. The four truths are known as dukkha, samudaya, nirodha, and magga. These four forms the essence of Buddhist teachings, and they hold a central position in the achievement of inner peace and enlightenment. The truths fundamentally deal with suffering. The first truth of suffering, dukkha. The first truth talks about the apparent and obvious suffering which are physical. A person will grow old, he will fall sick, and last he will eventually die. These are three apparent and inevitable sufferings that a person is bound to go through. Buddha stressed upon suffering and described that suffering is deeply entrenched in the lives of humans. He said that life is perfect, and not everything pans out the way we want them. Many things turn out against our expectations. This saddens us, and that is suffering. A human being as a subject to desires. Buddha was of the view that human beings are tuned in a way that they desire and keep looking for things that they think provide satisfaction. They have yearnings and cravings. They don't settle for what they have. Humans are in constant material growth. But the satisfaction that they achieve from the fulfillment of desire is short-lived. Pleasure, according to Buddha, doesn't last long. If in any case it does, then experiencing constantly would make it impotent. This is the truth that even if we are healthy physically and we don't experience any sadness from our environment, we will still be unfulfilled. There will always be something that will keep us from happiness. We will suffer. Buddha says the truth of suffering is that suffering will always be there. The teachings of Buddha for some appear so gloomy and pessimistic. But, according to Buddha, this is realism. If we think ourselves, we will know that what he had tried to describe is absolutely true. The teachings of Buddha don't necessarily highlight suffering only. He went on to describe the way of dealing with suffering and ending them. The second noble truth, origin of suffering, samudaya. The second truth is the origin of suffering, which is called samudaya. In our daily lives, we encounter many things that can be termed as the causes of our suffering. Having no water to drink when thirsty, get oneself injured and experience pain, and losing someone we loved. All these are ostensibly identifiable causes of suffering. Irrespective of the identification of the causes of suffering, the roots are some other place. The roots of the causes of suffering are deep. The suffering, according to Buddha, primarily sprouts from tanha, which means desire. It's the desire which is a real evil. There are 3 roots of evil. Greed. Greed is on the top. People who have greed are always after material gains, and in doing so, they come across failures and fall into the abyss of suffering. Greed is represented by a rooster. Ignorance. People are ignorant and are in disbelief. The disbelief that having all material will help them achieve satisfaction and happiness thereafter. Ignorance is represented by a pig. Hatred. Hatred is the 3rd root of evil. People tend to get jealous of others, especially when they see the things others have which they yearn for. Hatred kills them from inside, and it is represented by a snake. There is another term called chanda. This also deals with desires, but with the good ones, like the desire for enlightenment and knowledge. Such desires are appreciated as opposed to tanha, which is the evil desires. The Fire Sermon. Buddha, in his sermon, which is known as the Fire Sermon, spoke to over 1,000 bhikkhus, monks, and stressed upon the causes of suffering. He talked about the attachment to the recurring thoughts is the cause of suffering. In the present day, psychologists call the process of recurring thoughts as obsessions, which has its basis in depression. It is one of the common psychological disorders. The 3rd noble truth, cessation of suffering, Nirodha. The 3rd truth is the cessation of suffering, which is called as Nirodha in scriptures. Nirodha deals with dealing with the suffering and putting an end to them. Buddha believed that there is a possibility that one can be liberated from one's desires. In order for extinguishing the desires which are the main cause of suffering, nirvana comes into play. Nirvana. The meaning of nirvana is to extinguish. For achieving the stage of enlightenment, one has to follow a route. Nirvana is the way. Nirvana is extinguishing of desires and fire of 3 evils, greed, ignorance, and hatred. Without shunning them from the life, one doesn't qualify to reach enlightenment. Nirvana is a state in which a person doesn't feel negative desires. Rather, it is an attempt of keeping the negativity away from him. An adherent feels positive and utmost spiritual joy without any disturbing negativity. Such a statement of mind is a prerequisite for enlightenment, and through enlightenment, only a person shows compassion and sympathy to all. After a person who is enlightened dies, he is liberated from all the cycles of reincarnation. No definite answers are available as to what happens to a person who is liberated from cycles of rebirth. Buddha warned those who asked the questions and encouraged them to focus on the present and the nirvana. He suggested not to get fussy and pedantic by asking questions. The 4th noble truth, the path to the cessation of suffering, Magga. The 3rd that talks about the cessation of suffering. The 4th noble truth, which path will lead towards achieving the objective of cessation of suffering. The 4th truth is called Magga. Magga is a set of principles and rules which will help in the termination of suffering from the life of an adherent. There are 8 factors and steps which rely on each other and help a person achieve his objective. The Eightfold Path is also known as the moderate or middle way. It takes a middle approach. Understanding. Right understanding in scriptures is called samaditthi. Samaditthi is critically analyzing the teachings of Buddha and following after understanding. Buddha didn't ask people to follow him blindly. Intention. The intention of an adherent should be positive, and he should be committed to learning. Attitude towards learning plays an important role, and it is known as Samma Sankappa. Speech. When a person speaks, he should make sure that he is telling the truth, and he should make it certain that his speech is maligning the character of anyone. This is called Samavaka. Action. Action is known as Samakamanta. This means the actions of a person should be peaceful, and he should forge a peaceful and harmonious relationship with all. A person should remain warned of misdemeanors. Livelihood. Making livelihood with fair means is encouraged. One should not kill animals and exploit others for making a living. This is called Sama Ajiva. Effort. The effort is called Sama Vayama. This is a practice that a person is expected to do in order to avoid negative thoughts coming to mind. Mindfulness. Mindfulness is the realization of body and sensations. One should be aware of everything that has happened to him. This is called Samasati. Concentration. For staying aware, an adherent should concentrate. A person is expected to develop the focus to stay on the right path. This is called Sama Samadhi. These 8 practices work together for an adherent to achieve enlightenment and are the path towards the cessation of suffering. In the end, Siddhartha Gautama left his house in the search of meaning that why is their suffering ubiquitous? Why do people cry and sob? Why is there pain? He founded a whole religion on understanding suffering. He gave his 4 noble truths that encompass suffering in its entirety. When we look around in our personal lives, we come to know that Buddha was very right thousands of years ago. His theories and understanding of pain and suffering is very applicable today. People are suffering across the world, and the main reason for that is not accepting what they have. By extinguishing desires, one can achieve happiness. These tenets are not only relevant to Buddhists, these are relevant to all across the board. Understanding suffering and practicing the ways due to which a person can put at half the suffering is subsequently going to lead towards enlightenment.